Alors, bonsoir et bienvenue. Je m'appelle Tanya O'Callaghan, je suis la gestionnaire principale des communications à la CEI. Alors, je suis accompagnée aujourd'hui par plusieurs autres membres de l'équipe de la CEI. Vous pouvez les reconnaître par leur chemise grise qui se promènent un peu partout dans la salle. Good evening, my name is Tanya O'Callaghan. I am the Senior Manager of Communications at CIRA. I'd like to express my gratitude to the many CIRA members who are in the room tonight, recognizable with their red lanyards around their necks. This event is an opportunity for us to spend time with you, our members, who share our interests and in many cases our passion for Canada's internet. So welcome to all of you this evening. I also want to welcome everyone who is following along via our webcast online. À ceux dans la salle qui ne sont pas encore membres de la CEI, on vous reconnaît par vos rubans blancs autour de vos coups. Je suis ravie que vous êtes joints à nous ce soir. On ouvre les portes de ces événements-ci aux gens qui ont des intérêts semblables aux nôtres afin d'aider nos membres à créer des liens et à élargir leur réseau. Si vous avez un nom de domaine.ca, on espère sincèrement que vous deviendrez un membre de la CEI ce soir, vous aussi. Si vous souhaitez en apprendre un petit peu plus à ce sujet-là, je vous invite à vous adresser à n'importe quel de mes collègues avec la chemise grise. Alors, la plupart d'entre vous qui êtes ici ce soir, vous connaissez la CEI. On est tout d'abord l'organisation qui gère le domaine.ca au nom de tous les Canadiens. Nous encourageons les Canadiens à choisir le suffixe .ca pour s'afficher comme Canadiens en ligne, mais nous gérons et sécurisons aussi l'infrastructure sous-jacente qui veille à ce que chaque site web .ca soit fonctionnel, qu'il soit stable et accessible de manière fiable pour les Canadiens, mais aussi pour les gens du monde entier. Managing.ca is our primary mandate, but CIRA also has a broader goal, which is to build a better online Canada. We do this a number of ways, including through the cybersecurity products and services we offer to Canadian organizations, some of which some of you may have already heard about this afternoon, as well as to our peers globally that enhance the quality, the security, and the performance of the internet. We also do this through something we call our Community Investment Program, which has provided more than $5 million to Canadian not-for-profits, to charities and academic researchers who are doing good things for and through the internet. We have supported projects across Canada, including a number of innovative projects from right here in Montreal. Ce soir, nous avons planifié pour vous une excellente soirée qui est axée sur un enjeu important que nous commençons tous à explorer, soit l'intelligence artificielle. Généralement, quand on organise des événements comme ce soir, c'est sur un sujet sur lequel nous, à la CEI, avons beaucoup d'expertise, un sujet sur lequel nous voulons vous éduquer, nos membres. Mais ce soir, on essaie quelque chose d'un petit peu différent. Tout comme vous, nous, à la CEI, on est curieux d'en apprendre un peu plus sur l'intelligence artificielle et sur la façon dont elle peut bénéficier l'avenir des entreprises et la vie des gens dans les 5 prochaines années. So we have a great evening planned for you this evening on an important issue that we're all starting to explore, which is artificial intelligence. We at CIRA, just like all of you, are curious about AI and how it can benefit the future of business and people's lives in the next 5 years. So tonight, we're excited to learn and to be part of a discussion on an issue that we're exploring truly together. With CIRA's purpose of building a better online Canada, we thought it was fitting to bring together the Canadian internet community here in Montreal and online so we could all better understand AI and how it'll affect us in our work. Les labos de la CEI sont un carrefour technologique où nous expérimentons avec des nouvelles idées, où nous collaborons avec d'autres organisations du secteur de la technologie et des domaines, et où nous visons à créer des projets qui contribuent à soutenir l'objectif stratégique de la CEI, qui est de bâtir un meilleur Canada en ligne. Les labos travaillent actuellement sur des projets novateurs, dont certains intègrent l'apprentissage machine. AI is a topic within our division CIRA Labs that CIRA Labs is exploring and that we're excited to have our Chief Technology Officer, who also leads our CIRA Labs department, Jacques Latour, here with us tonight. Alors, ce soir, on va animer une table ronde avec Jacques Latour et avec Samuel Witherspoon, qui est fondateur et DG d'une compagnie qui s'appelle Immersive Data Labs. So we'll have a roundtable discussion with our CTO, Jacques Latour, and with Samuel Witherspoon, who is the founder and CEO of Immersive Data Labs. Samuel leads Immersive Data Labs, which is an Ottawa-based firm that specializes in helping organizations understand and implement artificial intelligence solutions to solve business challenges. He worked in both engineering and law before leaving to start Immersive Data Labs. Jacques possède plus de 25 ans d'expérience dans le secteur privé et dans le secteur à but non lucratif. Il mène et dirige la gestion et la sécurité du registre.ca et son système DNS sous-jacent. So we'll conclude this evening with some networking where everyone will have a chance to ask some questions to our speaker, but also interact with each other. Alors, j'aimerais maintenant inviter Samuel et Jacques à se joindre à moi sur scène. Alors, un petit peu de logistique avant qu'on commence. Je vais commencer par poser quelques questions qui seront peut-être principalement adressées à Samuel. Et puis, vous aurez tous la possibilité de poser vos questions. Jacques va aussi participer à la discussion pour offrir le point de vue de la CEI. So we'll start with a few questions for Jacques and Samuel, and then we'll move to questions for the room. Now, today you might be doing something a little bit different for some of you. As you arrived today, you received a card with information on something called Social Q&A, which is an app where you, the audience, choose the questions. So you write your questions and vote for your favorites. And so the questions that we will then be asking Jacques and Samuel will be decided on based on popularity, which literally puts you, the audience, in the driver's seat of how tonight's roundtable is going to work. Alors, vous avez reçu une carte qui contient de l'information sur Social Q&A, qui est une application sur laquelle vous, le public, dans la salle, choisissez les questions. Et on va ensuite choisir les questions selon leur popularité. Alors, pour vous donner quelques temps pour penser à vos questions, choisir vos questions préférées, je vais commencer par quelques questions. So, Samuel, maybe we can start with a bit of a level set for the room. Can you talk to us a little bit about what is AI? What does that mean? And maybe just give some examples so that we all have a common understanding of what we're talking about.
Sure. So artificial intelligence is a sort of really broad concept that I'm not comfortable totally defining on my own. I think it has a whole bunch of connotations and applications that presently are totally impossible and totally impractical. So where my company operates, we specialize in machine learning, which is sort of the practical application or a subset of artificial intelligence. And so what it means to me, I guess, is being able to take information and have a computer autonomously make decisions, so predictions or classifications on its own. So it's taking information and doing something that we would traditionally attribute maybe a really simple decision a human would make. So examples of artificial intelligence, because I think it's more helpful to talk in examples than sort of theoretical, is things like autonomous vehicles. There's a long way to go there before they're truly autonomous, but that's an example. I think a lot of things on your phone, pretty much everyone here has a mobile device of some sort, so whether it's Siri or Google Assistant, the speech to text in there is a machine learning model that's transcribing your voice and sort of generating some sort of output on that basis. Google Translate is another example. There are like a million examples on your phone, even Google's predictive search and predictive typing on your keyboard. So everyone here interacts with machine learning every day, thousands of times without realizing it.
So what is it not?
What is it not? I think it's not something that's going to take anyone's job in this room anytime soon. I think it's not something that's particularly sophisticated right now. And why am I confident in saying that? It has trouble telling the difference between the front and rear end of a cat. So it's not a really brilliant, robust system. It's good at performing these really menial tasks that if we define sort of human performance or human potential along those lines, we've made a huge mistake as humanity.
So can you maybe speak to us, so you've given us some examples of what it is and some examples of AI in our daily lives. Can you maybe give us a couple of examples of trends that you see coming in, say, the next 5 years?
Yeah, so I think we're increasingly living in like a multimedia world, whether that's audio, text, image, video, or a combination. So if you think about your social media feeds, I think one trend we're going to start to see is better semantic understanding of that content. So that goes for text, audio, video, the whole spectrum. What I mean by that is right now computers don't really have a concept of meaning. They have different ideas of how words are formulated, or how concepts are developed. And so from my perspective, one of the big trends is we're going to see increased semantic understanding from the devices we interact with. So it'll have a better idea of what the context around it is actually doing, what it means, and what that means for sort of the advice, the prediction, the way the device performs in that scenario.
I'm just curious in this room, how many, just by show of hands, how many people here are small business owners? So quite a few. So for all the small business owners in the room, what about some trends on things that might benefit them, that might make their lives easier, might help progress their businesses?
Yeah, so I think a lot of machine learning right now is headed towards commoditization. We're not quite there yet. You're still sort of stuck paying an expert to come in and help with a lot of this stuff. I think as the market matures, we're going to see a lot of these opportunities sort of trickle down to price points where it makes a lot more sense for businesses to actually adopt them. I say that as someone who tries to sell these products, so bear that in mind. I think that the other trend you're going to start to see, especially in small business, is the sort of efficiency gains from the really mundane tasks. So if you use Outlook now, there's a little calendar annotator that you can use, and you can annotate where your availability is and send that out to schedule a meeting. The logical next step for Microsoft is to collect all that information that you've just given them and start to use that to actually schedule meetings for you when someone sends in a request. So those are the like sort of really low transaction value, but like high sort of impedance. Like it really interferes with your day when someone's repeatedly trying to schedule a meeting. And so those are the things that are going to be, automated in the relatively near future at a level that's performant enough for everyone in this room.
Jacques, est-ce que tu peux nous parler un peu des mesures que la CEI met en place pour explorer l'intelligence artificielle un peu?
Oui, à l'ACEI, dans le laboratoire, on a développé un programme pour évaluer l'utilisation de l'intelligence artificielle, surtout le machine learning, pour analyser le point .ca, pour créer un meilleur Canada en ligne. Fait qu'on en regarde juste pour donner une idée, on reçoit environ 15 000 queries par seconde DNS. Ça, c'est des requêtes de DNS qu'on capture. Fait qu'il faut storer l'information, il faut la mettre dans un big data system, il faut classifier l'information, puis après ça, il faut être capable de jouer dans l'information, puis essayer d'extraire de la valeur en utilisant le machine learning. Fait que on est encore en train de développer ça pour déterminer, essayer d'identifier des domaines qui sont malicious, des mauvais domaines, puis les mettre en quarantaine de suite. Essayer de déterminer plein de choses sur des profils. On a encore de la difficulté à jouer avec la quantité d'informations. C'est pas mal challenging, mais en gros, on est à nos débuts d'expérimentation là-dessus.
Alors, on vient de parler beaucoup des bénéfices de l'intelligence artificielle. Samuel, well, both of you, actually, maybe you can talk a little bit about, so we've talked about the upsides, but what about the downsides? What are, for example, some of the cybersecurity concerns that come along with AI?
I think one of the biggest, from my perspective, is how you manage your information repositories. So, the reason Google, Facebook, all of those companies are huge successes is they have these massive data stores with like every piece of information they could ever want about you. With that comes huge risk that information is compromised. We saw Cambridge Analytica successfully back some of that information out of Facebook. I think that equally applies to every single person in this room, starting to think about how you manage your own personal information, how you store it, where you store it, and sort of what you're letting people or third parties do with it. And I think that's a huge cybersecurity sort of threat that people aren't currently thinking about.
Je pense que ma plus grande peur aujourd'hui, au niveau de la cybersécurité, c'est que les mauvais acteurs, les bad actors, ils ont commencé à utiliser l'intelligence artificielle pour développer des mécanismes pour être meilleurs à nous attaquer, pour créer du meilleur malware, pour avoir des meilleures attaques. Ils n'ont pas besoin de s'inquiéter des politiques d'information, garder ça au privé. Ils volent de l'information, ça leur donne beaucoup d'informations pour pouvoir créer de l'information puis utiliser leur AI pour pouvoir générer de nouvelles attaques. Fait que dans le futur, c'est la plus grande crainte, c'est qu'est-ce qu'eux sont capables de faire. Nous, il va falloir développer des techniques similaires pour se défendre contre eux. Fait que c'est un peu challenging comme futur.
Est-ce qu'il y a une solution? La personne qui l'a serait riche?
Non, on n'a pas la solution encore, je pense, pour ça. Il y a beaucoup de solutions pour se protéger contre ça. C'est cyber. Avoir des bonnes... Si tous les gens ne cliqueraient pas sur tous les emails, la bonne éducation, des bonnes pratiques, peut-être des meilleurs logiciels pour se protéger, mais c'est les gens, s'ils sont moins susceptibles à certaines attaques, ça ferait un gros plus pour nous autres. On a besoin de la vraie intelligence humaine.
So we'll now look at the social Q&A app. I see there's a ton of questions online already, so I do want to make sure we get to at least some of them. But our time is limited, so we'll start with the most popular questions, as I mentioned, and if ever we don't have a chance to address your question, please feel free to connect either with one of our speakers or some of the other CIRA staff around the room who can certainly answer your question one-on-one during the cocktail period. Alors, j'ai essayé de laisser une bonne quantité de temps pour vos questions. Je vois qu'il y en a beaucoup en ligne. Si jamais, comme j'ai mentionné tantôt, si jamais on n'a pas l'occasion de poser vos questions, il va y avoir du temps pendant la période de cocktail pour que vous puissiez connecter avec nos présentateurs ou avec d'autres employés de la CEI. Puis, veuillez noter que je vais lire, je vois que la plupart des questions sont en anglais, je vais lire les questions dans la langue dans laquelle elles ont été posées. So the first question, I might need help from the person in the audience just to understand. I see it has a lot of votes, but I don't understand it. So I may be putting someone on the spot. The question reads, even though I received a reminder with login ID, the system said I had not registered. Perhaps something needs tweaking. So is that...
That's not somebody from here. That's somebody who's trying to get in from outside. I had the same problem with the annual meeting.
Okay. Thank you. That's good feedback. Perfect. All right, then. So we will look into that to our webcast attendees. So how do we balance the use of automated AI solutions with traditional human expertise? How much oversight do you think is needed?
So I think from my perspective, one of the organizations we look to for a lot of this is DARPA. DARPA in the United States, they're sort of a defense research lab. They are probably operating in one of the most ethically or morally ambiguous edges of artificial intelligence or machine learning. Their sort of conventional wisdom here is that they always use human in the loop when there's a potentially lethal consequence. So if you're driving a car, there is always a potentially lethal consequence. Therefore, you would always use human in the loop. It's a really big ethical and moral problem that we're going to have to confront as a society. Not just the fact that like autonomous vehicles pose job losses, but also how does it make decisions when it's driving down the street? Does it run over the the pedestrians on the sidewalk, or does it hit the person crossing the road, jaywalking? These are like human in the loop questions that until we have a better answer for how we want to solve that as a society, there's always going to be someone sitting with their hand hovering the steering wheel, making that split-second decision so that a machine is not put in a position to do that.
So hence part of your comment earlier that they're not about to start taking all of our jobs.
Exactly.
Jacques, any?
Well, from a different perspective, AI today is good to answer questions. So you need human beings. We need to figure out what the questions are. Then you can build an AI system, machine learning system, to answer those questions. And then there's a process to make that work. So for .ca, for example, if we want to find bad domains that are registered live, then we need to build the training set, the classifier, the entire, and then pick and choose the appropriate model to analyze the data to get to the answer. So there's a lot of work involved in making it work. And then once you've done all that, it only works for that. You can reuse it for other stuff, but you need a lot of human intervention. So I think AI is not click a button and it does everything on its own. There's a lot of work today with machine learning to make it do anything.
So I feel like that's a great segue to the next question, which is, when considering the evolution of AI, are you making linear or exponential projections? These are tough questions. Great questions.
Tough crowd.
I'm not great at predicting the future, so I'll start with that. I think we're pretty much stuck in a world right now where we're constrained by the computational power we can sort of turn on to these things. That's from a cost perspective, that's from a power perspective, and that's also just we can't fit many more transistors into a little microchip. So our biggest problems right now are hardware related, not algorithm related. There's lots of great advancement in algorithms, but we're still constrained by like how fast we can calculate something. And I think that since all of these models require that calculation to occur, I'm gonna say linear, but I have like no success predicting the future. I'd be in the wrong job if I was.
It's anybody's guess, but eventually, whenever one day quantum computing comes in, it might change the game. But before that, I think it's pretty much linear.
Great. So this one I think is right in your bailiwick, Jacques. The use I see for AI for the time being is to help monitor servers for attacks. Are there any suggestions for AI software for this application? So I think the work that you mentioned that even Sierra Labs is doing is kind of going down that road, if not attacks, but certainly malicious behavior.
So I haven't seen too many like network management application, at least open source, that leverage any machine learning or AI today. There's a lot of like Splunk and Elk, Elasticsearch Engine, Kibana. They have plugins to do machine learning, and I think they have some capabilities to do monitoring, but you need to configure that on your own. So there are some tools, but some are open source. They seem to be, no, it's not even open source. You need to pay to get the machine learning part for your functionality. So some tools do it.
No? Great.
No idea.
All right. I consider artificial intelligence actually does not exist. I believe that what we have today is assisted intelligence. So this speaks a little bit to defining, we were having a conversation before the panel about sort of what's what and what is artificial intelligence and what's within it. So I think it'd be good to revisit some of that.
Yeah, so I agree that there's no real artificial intelligence right now. It's really, really narrow, shallow thinking is the best it's capable of doing. So I mentioned the cat classification problem. You can train it on millions of pictures of cats, and then you turn the cat around or you turn it upside down. Like, there are ways to solve that with your data pre-processing, but the fact that we're even talking about having to solve that says, these solutions or the things it learns are pretty brittle. They don't generalize very well, and so what that means is like it may recognize the front of a cat, but like any 2-year-old, you can show it a cat once, and it goes, okay, I now recognize like black and white cats, orange cats, pink cats. It doesn't matter. I recognize cartoon cats. The same is not true for any of these algorithms. So it is not intelligent, and it's totally artificial. And so what we do deliberately is we define what we do as machine learning. It's learning these like relatively complex functions that describe a tiny little domain of human thought or human cognition. It's not anything complicated. It's differentiating between cats and dogs. It's not understanding how cats and dogs interact. Doesn't know anything else other than, I think that looks like a cat, and here's the probability it's a cat. Or I think that's a dog, here's the probability it's a dog. So not at all artificial, or totally artificial, not very intelligent.
It's a marketing.
So, oh, sorry here. There we go. Everything's moving while I'm listening. So what's Canada's current position on AI research and development in relation to the rest of the world?
I think we are a global leader, but I think we are probably close to not being the global leader. We're in Montreal. Mila is like not even a kilometer away. There is tons of phenomenal research in Montreal, Toronto. Those are and Edmonton. Those are sort of the 3 original hubs. But virtually every Canadian research institution these days has phenomenal researchers that are doing really, really great work. So it's sort of crazy to define ourselves as like a Montreal, Toronto, Edmonton, or University of Alberta nation. I think, are we losing that sort of arms race? Potentially, but it's hard to tell right now because a lot of the noise is coming out of Canada, both on the corporate side and on the research side. So,
is there something more you think we could be doing or should be doing in order to maintain that top position?
I think that probably government funding or continued government funding into Canadian research institutions. Why I say that is right now, Samsung, Google, everyone comes and they basically like buy a lab. So Google Brain bought the University of Alberta lab. There's a bunch of people a bunch of big companies that have come in and acquired a lot of the Montreal labs. Toronto's the same. And I think that, keeping some of that stuff in the public domain with public research dollars that everyone can use and understand and take advantage of, I think that's really important. It's how we would preserve a lead because big companies like Google fly their researchers to Silicon Valley and we lose them forever.
So one of our, like for Sierra Labs, one of the challenge we have is finding resource to work in the lab to do some AI and machine learning. So to find a senior grad that has some experience, it's almost impossible for us to put our hands on. So we always end up having first year with some basic experience, or they come at Sierra and they learn on the job what machine learning is. So we train them, but we definitively need more skills in Canada if you want to be the leader.
So it's interesting, we've talked about the impact or non-impact of AI on people's jobs, but the flip side of that is trying to find people who can work in AI and who have the skills to work in AI, or we're short on that right now in Canada.
Oh, for sure.
So here's a deep philosophy question, I think. Does AI have to equal human intelligence to be trustworthy or be better than human intelligence?
I am not qualified.
I don't have a really great answer for this, but I'll tackle it with an analogy and see if that gets us somewhere. So sentiment analysis is a really complicated problem. It's figuring out like whether people are talking positively or negatively about something. So everyone in this room would agree when I say, this is a delicious glass of water, that's a positive statement about the water. this is a horrible glass of water, or this is a disgusting glass of water, it's a negative statement. But if I said, my mom said the glass is half full, my dad said the glass is half empty, the water is clear, I drank it, it quenched my thirst, and that was my review. Was it positive or negative? And maybe show of hands, because this will, so positive review that I just gave. How many positives? One. How many two? Okay, how many negative reviews? One, two. So we've got 50-50 of the 4 people in the room who participated. Great sample size. I'm not satisfied with the data set, but the point I'm trying to make is like humans are going to disagree on tasks like that all the time, so we can't even evaluate how well the computer model would perform on scoring that review. So there's a performance threshold that we run into. So to say a computer algorithm is trustworthy, the same problem arises if we decide whether I hit the people on the sidewalk or in the crosswalk, right? There's shades of gray and no one right answer to any of these problems. So I think I can't answer, but I can tell you that humans won't agree. So maybe we're evaluating the wrong thing.
So Jacques, this one's totally in your bailiwick and mine. So is it possible that the development of AI will eliminate the need for domain names altogether?
Ooh, interesting question. No.
Can I jump in? I'm asking the questions I don't get to answer, but for sure, I think one thing that I would add to your answer, or will build into your answer before you get into it, is it's certainly a topic that has been top of mind. I work in the marketing and communications department, and so obviously when we look at what the market might look like and what we're up against and how do we think about domain names differently, for sure we think a lot about how, for example, voice search has affected the need for domains. You don't even see it. When you ask Siri your question and she spits out the answer and you don't even see the source, let alone what the domain name was for it, it changes things. It changes what people might look for in a domain name, the importance of it, and so on. So it's certainly been a topic of much discussion for us at CIRA.
So the domain name, it's a DNS, so having its naming resource to IP addresses on the internet, that's always going to be there. So in a form or another, either a DNS used by a machine or a DNS used by a human, it could have less sex appeal or fancy names if it's used by a machine, but overall, I think DNS is going to be there for a long time, even if AI eventually picks up to what you think AI is or should be.
All right, so at what point could we expect AI to become user-friendly for the masses to download and modify?
Oh, you got a nice demo, right, for AI?
Yeah, I think like it really depends on what you mean by user-friendly. So we have, I downloaded the French Google Translate module. By the way, I just unlocked my phone with facial recognition, which is a machine learning model. But let's find Google Translate. So I can have a conversation. How good is the Google Translate model?
Quelle est la qualité du modèle de traduction de Google?
Sounded like French.
Pas trop bon. Pas trop bon.
Not too good.
So, I mean, it's already accessible. I think the question is, like, what is the business problem you're trying to solve? And very, very often, that is the hardest question to answer. The model itself, or like the mathematics behind it, or the implementation, those are like, they're not easy problems, but they're problems you can kick down the road until you actually understand the business problem or the question that you're trying to answer with it. So if you have a translation problem today, if you have a speech-to-text problem today, because it's in everyone's pockets, I think that, depending on the scale, all of those things, those are problems that you have to confront once you have them. But depending on what you want to do, possibly right now.
So the next question is a bit of a CIRA question. So how is CIRA Labs funded, and which percentage of revenue is used for it? And of that, which percentage is used for AI research?
So the Cira Lab, so what's the first one? How much?
So, just disappeared on me. How is CIRA Labs funded? And
So
then,
Cira Lab is funded through Cira. So it's we have a couple of people working in Cira Lab. So we get funding from corporate to work. We use about 2% of the resource within Cira, which is not enough to do a lot of AI work. And the last one? It's 50% of our work is on AI, machine learning, specifically machine learning on .ca and these on firewall data to look at cyber threats inside .ca. So.
and actually, since I answered this question to someone just before the panel, I'll even backfill on what Jacques said, which is CIRA itself is actually a lot of, I think if you're here, most of you probably know something about us, but so just to clarify about our funding, so we're actually a not-for-profit organization, but that is self-funded. So our broad, Jacques referred to kind of our corporate funding, our broad funding comes from the revenue we make largely from .ca domains, of course, which is our main reason of being. So every time someone registers a domain name with their registrar, we get a portion of each domain. And now, so for those of you who were just at our cybersecurity presentation before this one, we also receive then some revenue from the various cybersecurity or registry products and services that we sell to Canadians, Canadian organizations, or others around the world. So of those self-funded revenues, then obviously our primary purpose is to then invest those into managing the CA domain and all of its underlying infrastructure. And then from the revenues that are left, we fulfill sort of our mandate to build a better online Canada. One of the ways we do that is through Jacques' Cira Labs. So the AI examples that have been given, such as predictive search, seem to only use the past. To me, AI would have far more, I'm not sure, were it to spend more time, more intelligence. I got it. Clearly, I might be lacking a little bit by the end of the day today. So to me, AI would have far more were it to spend more time pondering the future. So were I to ask, where's Afghanistan, Google would know where I work and might suggest to me that this is an inappropriate question rather than to fill in the blank after where is. Is work being done in this area?
I guess sort of predicting the future? Is that, I'm a bit confused by the question, to be honest. So where is Afghanistan?
Is the person in the room who asked? Maybe it's an online person. Oh, well, no, it's the person who asked us in the room. If you could explain your thinking maybe a little bit. No? So I think if we talk about, and so pardon me if I'm adapting your question in a way that wasn't meant, but maybe about sort of making it more, I think it speaks a little bit to the intelligence part that we were talking about, by just being more than just understanding the question or understanding the answer, but also starting to understand context to the question.
Yeah, so right now, the only opportunities well, I've got to be really careful how I phrase that, but it's the tasks that it's capable of performing are not totally new things. A human formulates the question, a human assembles the training set, a human assembles the test set, and a human evaluates the model performance. There's no room or no capability to think about the future. It doesn't think, it sort of puts things into piles nicely. That's sort of the extent of artificial intelligence right now, is sorting like a 2-year-old would.
Well, yeah, if you think about it, if you want to find a cat, you have to build a model to find a cat. You have to build a model to do all the different things. And then if you think of all the things that a human can do, and you have to build training set, classifier to replicate everything we do, we're a long way from there. So there's no real intelligence per se.
So you'll love this next question. I see for anyone who's following on the app along the way, there's some questions about different CIRA programs or different CIRA practices. So I'll keep those for after for people to come and see us along the way. Oh, so I see things are moving as I'm talking, so I'll skip ahead because there's one that's just too good. We literally said these words before the panel started. Someone posted, seen recently, if you're using Python or MATLAB, it's machine learning. If you're using PowerPoint, it's AI. So it speaks back to AI is just a marketing term.
But that's true.
I'll say so because I'm in marketing, so maybe it is. So what about AI robots like Sophia and Erica, some that even got recognized as persons and got their citizenship in some countries? Is this true AI?
I don't know Sophia or Erica. Do you?
That was a deep network, deep neural.
No, Sophia's a sex robot. Right.
I mean, can Sophia consent? I think I'd throw that back. And if your answer is no, then it's not a person.
So ethical AI is a huge issue, and you spoke a little bit, touched on it a little bit when you were talking about DARPA earlier. So read weapons of mass destruction. How can we ensure that AI is used ethically in the future?
I think this is a massive, open-ended question, and I think one of the ways is we all need to be a little more informed about it. We all need to engage in a sort of open civil discourse about it. I think there are lots of positive uses for it, and I think there are equally lots of negative uses for machine learning, artificial intelligence, whatever you want to call it. I think it starts with continuing to support science education, and I think that starts in primary school. So, we support a strong public school system. I think also, though, our elected representatives need to start talking about these problems that are inevitably going to confront, maybe not them immediately, but in the near future. We have, weapons of mass destruction. We have treaties that prevent their spread around the world. We probably need to talk about how we're going to change our behavior around machine learning, automated targeting. Like, these are very real issues today, and it's not fun for politicians to talk about them all the time because they're complicated, messy. We have to admit that we shoot people from drones. These are all really messy conversations, but they're ones that we need to have in forums like this. So I'm glad I'm here, and I'm glad people are asking these questions, and we should continue to.
So one thing I saw recently in Canada, there's a CIO strategy council, and they're building a policy to have ethical AI today for future work. That means they're going to be thinking about whatever they do, it has to be ethical. So at least I'm seeing some work in Canada at that level, which is a good thing.
So what are the main industries in which AI R&D is most aggressively being done? And what are some of the trends for practical application?
I mean, in terms of industries, I think e-commerce, Amazon desperately wants you to put more stuff in your cart when you're checking out. If you haven't noticed that they say of recommended items or customers like you bought these things, that's a problem that it hasn't been beaten to death. It's a recommendation engine, but e-commerce, Netflix does the same thing with videos, TV shows. I think those are, we've just become so used to having smart suggestions. Search engine technology, I don't know how many of you have ever tried to use anything other than Google, but it's atrocious. I find DuckDuckGo is just the results aren't the results I expect, and I find myself back at Google very quickly, despite all of the privacy problems that come with that. I think those are the industries where it's not mature by any stretch, but it is far, far more pervasive than we give it credit for. And the second part?
What are the trends for practical application?
I think practical applications, as I mentioned earlier, the sort of like semantic understanding of content. My company, we're focused on unstructured content. So it's things that don't come in like nice tables and columns with great labels. So that's, this conversation we're having now. It's really hard to transcribe that. If the video feed, how many people are here? That's a really complicated problem for a computer to answer. There's a ton of sort of robust information that we currently sort of throw away when we look at information like that. And so I think the trend will be better and better understanding of that unstructured content as we sort of push into the future.
Well, I think the key thing here is that there's information in the data that you throw away. So if you don't log everything, that means you're losing information. So the future is going to be more logging of your information in your business, things that you don't think of, where the connections are coming from, all the web transfer, everything that comes in. And then the trend, I think, is going to have more and more smaller business, cloud solution, Canadian cloud solution that will take your data and give you information in a way you trust that it's not stolen or taken or used by other entities. So it's going to be, I think it's going to become mainstream stuff you can use for a small business. That's a trend on AI. And AI is answering questions. So it's all about, if you have a question, you can build a system to answer that. And I think the small business are going to address that more easily in the future.
So Samuel, in your answer to the first part of that question, you talked about the volume of data being important to sort of make it better. So this question ties into this. So AI requires data. Data delivery relies on the internet. So what chances do low-density population areas have to benefit on these developing and growing technologies?
So one of the areas of research that my company invests in is something called edge computing. So edge computing is the idea that it's far cheaper for us to do the bulk of the heavy lifting, sort of right where the information is captured, and then we just send back the sort of little stream of metadata that is relevant. So in terms of remote communities, I think the cost is getting lower. We are not there yet, but we're getting there. You have a speech-to-text model on your phone. You have lots of machine learning models stored, trained, and preserved on your phone. So we're getting closer to a more ubiquitous edge computing world. I think that the impact that will have on remote communities is twofold. One, we'll see better service for those communities because it will require less bandwidth to reach them. And I think that, that means incoming and outgoing information streams. And I think that the other piece is we'll start to see sort of, I hope anyway, I should say, I hope for the second one, we'll start to see the ability to more effectively research and remote work in those locations because the infrastructure is more robust, lower cost, and easier to bring to those places.
So this is what happens when we put people in the driver's seat of questions. So what's the benchmark, quote unquote, for human intelligence, Hawkins or Trump? And I was thinking about skipping over this question, but I think it is when we talk about what kind of intelligence are we building or do we want to build into AI, in hindsight, it is an interesting goalpost. But then I'm not the one answering that, so.
I think we're more in the business AI side of it than building living AI. So I have no prediction.
There's got to be some philosophers who've tried to answer this. I think, therefore I am.
So can CIRA educate politicians so that they are better prepared to have discussions about internet in general and also AI? So do you want to speak maybe to some of the work we do with government and others?
So internet in general, for sure. So I guess one of the hats I have is building infrastructure in Canada, so building more internet exchange points. So we need way more outreach and understanding how we use the Canadian internet and where traffic flows and who's looking at your data and what they can do with the metadata and what kind of machine learning and AI they can do with your data when it doesn't flow in Canada, and prediction they can make on people profile. So it's pretty bad that it's easy to do that. So keeping that traffic in Canada is number one. The outreach, I don't think it's our job, Sura, to do outreach with the government on AI. There's different group and organizations that are doing that today. Maybe you can talk about it.
I'm not aware of any government groups. I mean, I'm sure they exist. It's just not something that I've really focused on, but I hope there are.
I know for sure, like Alex Benet, the CIO for Canada, is like ethical AI is top of mind. So at least government at that level, I think they got that covered. So.
All right. Should the government of Canada not be taking a leading role in both researching AI and coordinating private sector? Who is? And yeah. So we talked about it a little bit when you talked earlier about the kinds of things that certainly the public sector could be doing. Do you see a bigger role for the government?
I think they could always fund our public institutions better. I think right now a lot of public institutions are forced to go out to the private sector for grant matching. It's not always the case, but I think there's always room for real independent scientific research that isn't colored by sort of like an industry requirement. But we do a great job. Like NSERC is a phenomenal organization. They have an amazing international reputation. They've developed some machine translation work that's world renowned. They're a very, very active group when it comes to machine learning research. They do other research other than machine learning, but the government is doing these things. I think there's always room for more public funding for that.
So you talked a little bit earlier about structured and unstructured learning. So far you've focused on machine learning with respect to structured learning. What are your comments about the state and direction of unstructured learning in machine learning without the need for, I'm assuming this is for training data?
Are they?
I'll say what I think and you let me know if I'm right. So unsupervised learning.
Yeah, I think it's not structured and unstructured.
Yeah,
it's supervised and unsupervised.
Yeah,
Is what's
supervised
being
learning,
conflated.
unsupervised learning. So part of Sierra Lab, we did a bunch of experiment on using unsupervised learning to tell us information about the data. So we gave it a bunch of DNS data. So just before I go on this, there's very little expertise in the world on using AI with DNS data. Most of the expertise is on video, photo, and like image analysis. There's not much on the DNS, so we're trying to break new grounds and find new ways of looking at the data. And we did some unsupervised learning. It came back with really cool information. And the challenge we have is we have no clue how it came to those conclusions and how to trust it. But it looks good, but we can't say for real. Like we asked the machine, like look at all this DNS data, GeoIP, all the query, and tell me where I should put .ca name servers on the planet based on making this the best location for all users. And it pointed a bunch of sites, and we said, yeah, these are good, but there's no way you can figure out why those are the best location. It did a bunch of stuff in the back, and because of him maybe, and then they came back with answers on the, like, it's good, but I have no clue how to get it.
Yeah, I think
That's about right. So I think I'll end. We have time for just one more question, and I want to pick this one here because it's so very practical for all of you in the room. So that said, what do we, .ca, TLD owners and practitioners, need to do to protect our data and its usage in machine learning / corporate initiatives? How can .ca domain owners, what can they do to protect their data and its usage in machine learning, basically?
Oh. So as a domain owner, you have a website, you have name servers that you control. So if you want to protect your data, I'm not sure what the answer is.
Not
What about just,
necessarily
like,
even
for
from
people?
our
Yeah.
domain, sort of machine learning, but in general, I guess it's for everyone in the room, what can they do to protect themselves in a machine learning world?
Well, the zone firewall, for example, is so people trying to, I don't know.
Well, I'll go at it from a personal information standpoint. Everyone in this room has a phone, so either Google or Apple know you're here tonight. So be aware of the information you're giving away, and maybe make the companies pay a price to collect it. And how do you make them pay a price? You just don't make it as easy as we do right now. So the example I would use is like, how many people, and we'll line up after and we can run this experiment, how many people will let me take a picture of your face? We'll just stand over there and I'm gonna take pictures of everyone who lets me. Then I'm gonna get you, the other line is going to be there giving me your postal code, your phone number, your address, your high school that you went to, and I'm going to see which line gets the most people, and then we'll decide which group should have done that afterwards. I will tell you right now, you should give me your face 10 times out of 10, but most people wouldn't think that way. We've handed over all of that information in the other line that I just described to Facebook and Google for free a long time ago, and we didn't even think twice before we handed it over. So if you don't believe me, you can download your Facebook profile and they'll let you know that I'm right.